Imagine a city. And this city, it produces the literal nuts and bolts of the global economy. The tiny button on your shirt, a disposable lighter, the simplest fridge magnet.
Most mundane things imaginable.
Exactly. So how can that city, the one that specializes in the cheapest, most everyday stuff, also be the absolute, undisputed center of global commerce? It feels like a paradox.
It is. It's a massive contradiction, and that's what we're diving into today. The world of Yiwu, a place so dominant in small goods that when you really look at the scale of it, it almost defies logic.
I've heard people call it the end of the universe.
You do, because the thinking is, if a thing exists anywhere in the world, you can probably bet it's made, packaged, and shipped from Yiwu.
It's basically the world's unsung, industrialized secret Santa. And let's just start with one fact that completely blew my mind.
Oh, I think I know the one you're going to say.
Yiwu is responsible for making and exporting 60% of all the Christmas decorations sold globally. 60%.
So the real workshop of Santa Claus is actually this enormous industrial engine in China. It's incredible.
And that's just the seasonal stuff.
Right. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It really just shows you the kind of market saturation they can achieve. This isn't just about Christmas baubles.
Not at all.
In 2023 alone, the total export value from this one city was over 500 billion yuan.
Wow.
And its products reached 233 different countries and regions.
So that's every corner store, every party planner, every hardware chain on the planet relying on this one place. And the foot traffic there must reflect that.
It does. We're not talking about, remote factories nobody sees. This is a thriving, bustling hub. Over 1.1 million registered businesses.
The buyers.
Over 500,000 foreign merchants visit every single year just to shop for those buttons, those threads, those little plastic things.
So, okay, the big question for this deep dive has to be, why Yiwu? Why didn't this pop up in a big coastal hub like Shanghai or Shenzhen?
Exactly. We always hear the same three theories, right? Merchant culture, a first mover advantage, geography. And look, they all have some truth to them.
But they're not the whole story.
Not even close. They're insufficient. So our mission today is to look at those common ideas, really pick them apart, and then uncover the crucial, often overlooked factor that truly explains how Yiwu got this unshakable dominance.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start right at the beginning, the legacy of necessity. Because when we think of great trading cities, we picture places blessed by nature, deep harbors, big rivers.
Fertile land.
Fertile land, exactly. But Yiwu's story starts with the complete opposite. It starts with hardship.
That's the critical starting point. The entire region of Zhejiang, where Yiwu is, it had this profound resource problem. There's a local saying that just paints the picture perfectly.
What's that?
7 parts mountains, 1 part water, and 2 parts farmland.
So basically, no room to grow anything. Agriculture, the bedrock of any society back then, was just incredibly limited.
And for Yiwu specifically, it was even worse. That 2 parts farmland they did have. The soil was this sticky, low-fertility, yellow-red earth.
Terrible for growing rice.
Just awful for rice, the staple crop.
Yeah.
So you couldn't sustain a population on farming. It created this existential choice for people. You either leave or you hustle.
Necessity becomes the mother of invention.
Literally. And here's the beautiful irony, the twist in the story. That same useless yellow-red soil,
Yeah.
it turned out to be perfect for growing sugarcane.
No way.
Yes. And that one small, crucial difference allowed brown sugar to become their first major trade commodity. They took a huge geographical weakness and turned it into the fuel for an empire.
And that leads us right to the origin story, the legendary sugar-knocking gangs. The Kao Tang Bang.
It sounds so quaint, doesn't it? Sugar-knocking gangs. But this was the precursor to a massively complex modern logistics network.
So what did they do? They would carry these cakes of brown sugar on their backs.
On foot for hundreds of miles.
And trade them door to door for the lowest value items you can possibly imagine.
The most famous trade was exchanging sugar for feathers.
Feathers?
Chicken feathers, duck feathers, goose feathers, and scrap metal. Think about that economic trade. They weren't trading for silk or tea. They were trading a processed food for garbage, essentially. To a farmer, a handful of feathers is worthless.
But the Yiwu merchants saw something else. They saw an opportunity. They collected all these feathers, millions of them, and processed them.
And this is where the genius comes in. The best feathers, the high-quality ones, were made into feather dusters. which they then sold elsewhere for actual money.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what about the bad feathers, the scraps?
And that's the part that shows you the true capital creation. The low-grade scraps, they weren't wasted. They were used as fertilizer.
To improve the terrible yellow-red soil back home.
Exactly. It was a perfect circular economy. They were creating monetary capital from the dusters and soil capital from the fertilizer, all from something that everyone else saw as zero-value waste. This wasn't just hustling. This was high-level resource arbitrage before that was even a term.
And this was not just a few guys wandering the countryside. This became a huge, organized system. It had to be, right? To manage such low-margin, high-volume trade.
Scale is what's truly staggering. By 1949, the people involved in these sugar-knocking gangs, they made up over 5% of the entire county's population.
5%.
We're talking tens of thousands of people moving systematically across the country. They were going as far south as Guangdong, as far north as Zhuzhou.
Okay.
That's crossing half of China on foot.
And it was the internal organization that made it all work. It was split into two main systems. First, you had the Dantu.
Those are the carrying teams, the frontline sales guys. They handled the bartering, the distribution.
And then you had the Zuofang.
The Zuofang. You can think of them as the workshops or the home base. They weren't focused on sales. They were the logistical core. They made the sugar cakes, yes, but more importantly, they were the hubs. They provided a safe place to stay, coordination, support for the traveling teams.
And even within the sales teams, the Dantu, there was a whole hierarchy. It was designed for trust, right, over these long, long routes.
Absolutely. At the top, you had the Lao Tu, the veteran leaders. These guys were on the road for months, even years at a time.
And below them,
You had the Longdan, the team organizers. They were the logistics wizards, making sure supplies were in the right place at the right time. And then you had the Nianbo, the senior peddlers. This was not some haphazard street vending. This was professional, specialized, systematic commerce.
So this brings us to the first big theory, that this incredible history, this, cultural DNA of resourceful, systematic trade, that's what explains Yiwu's dominance.
And that is our first major critique. Because while that history is absolutely essential, the merchant culture theory alone just isn't enough. It's insufficient. Well, if a merchant culture is the key, why did the Global Center for Small Goods end up in Yiwu, a place built on feathers and sugar, and not in one of the historical epicenters of massive Chinese wealth and trade?
Right. You just have to look at China's history, these incredibly powerful merchant groups. The Huzhu Gang, the Shaanxi Gang.
The Fujian and Jiangsu gangs. These groups moved silk, tea, salt. They financed governments. They were the established national elites for centuries.
Let's just focus on Zhejiang province where Yiwu is. There was another far more powerful group there, wasn't there?
Oh, yes. The Nangxin Gang.
Yeah.
And they operated on a financial level that makes the sugar knockers look like they're playing in a sandbox. They had these famous, very strict tiers of wealth.
The 4 elephants, 8 bulls, and 72 dogs. It sounds like something from a fable.
It does, but it was a very real, precise measure of extreme wealth. And when we talk about an elephant merchant, you're talking about someone with over 10 million taels of silver.
Which, for context,
Yeah.
what does that even mean?
To put that in perspective for you, in the West during the Gilded Age, that kind of wealth puts you on par with a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt.
Wow.
These were the regional Eastern Rockefellers. They were financing railroads, commanding huge political influence. They were titans of industry.
So if the Nangxin merchants were these Gilded Age tycoons, the Yiwu sugar peddlers, for all their incredible grit and organization.
They were street vendors.
Yeah.
Their entire business model was about finding pennies in the dirt and turning them into nickels.
That contrast is everything. Yiwu's bootstrapping culture is amazing, but it wasn't a unique competitive advantage over these massive, highly capitalized, politically connected merchant houses.
Exactly. If commercial DNA was the silver bullet, the Nangxin gang should have owned the global market, not Yiwu. So the culture was necessary for survival, yes, but it was not sufficient for global dominance.
Okay. So we've kind of put the culture theory to bed. Let's move to the second big one, timing. The first mover theory. The idea that Yiwu just got in on economic reform earlier than anyone else and got an unbeatable head start.
And it's a very compelling story, right?
Yeah.
Especially for a place that became so famous so quickly. But when you look at the actual timeline, it just doesn't hold up.
What does the timeline show?
Yiwu's first little market prototype, it sort of emerged in the mid-1970s. But the official opening, the government document, wasn't until 1982. And it only really got national attention in 1986.
After that big People's Daily front page story.
Correct. So by the time Yiwu was on the national stage, other places had already been innovating and running with the reforms for years. And you have to look at Wenzhou as the main counterexample here.
Wenzhou was the real pioneer.
Wenzhou was the true pioneer of private enterprise in that era. By the early 1980s, Wenzhou was already nationally famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask for its entrepreneurial craze. It was a market already bursting at the seams.
How big are we talking?
We're talking over 400 specialized markets and production bases already up and running.
400. And what about the people, the sales agent?
This number is just astonishing. Wenzhou had an estimated 100,000 purchasing and sales agents already operating across the country. 100,000. They were the undisputed early champion.
They even had their famous 10 major professional markets.
Right, these were hyper-specialized clusters. You had places like the Kyoto button market, which did nothing but buttons and fasteners, or the Liushi low-voltage electrical appliances market. Wenzhou was organized, it was early, it was aggressive, and it was specialized.
So if Wenzhou had 100,000 agents out there in the early 80s, that's 10 times the number of Yiwu's historical peddlers. It just completely debunks the idea that Yiwu was the first mover.
It does. But this is where I want to challenge the narrative a bit. If Wenzhou was so early, so organized, and so specialized, why didn't they become the global small commodity capital? Why did Yiwu win in the long run?
That's a great question. Maybe. Was Wenzhou too specialized? If you only do buttons or only do electrical parts, you might dominate that one niche.
But you don't attract the global buyer.
The buyer who wants everything, who wants birthday candles and safety pins and zippers, all in a single trip.
That's a key insight. Wenzhou's hyper-specialization, which looked like a strength, actually increased the search costs for a big international buyer looking for diverse inventory.
Whereas Yiwu focused on aggregation, on putting everything in one place.
It focused on centralization, which reduced that search cost down to zero. So the first mover theory is debunked, and we're starting to see that the structure of a market, not just the timing, was the real differentiator.
Okay, so that leaves us with the third major theory, the one that always seems plausible when you're looking at a map: geography. The idea that Yiwu's location just destined it for success.
And geography is so often destiny, right?
Mm.
But Yiwu is the exception that proves the rule. It really lacks the huge geographical advantages of its neighbors.
I mean, if you look north, you've got the Hangzhou-Jiaxing-Huzhou area, right next to Shanghai, one of the biggest ports in the world.
And if you look east, you've got Ningbo, with its incredible coastline and world-class deep-sea ports.
And Yiwu has neither of those.
It has neither a natural harbor, like a Liverpool, nor does it sit at a major transportation nexus like Chicago that would make it an inevitable hub.
In fact, being landlocked in the mountains, it must have been a logistical nightmare to get to for decades compared to those coastal cities. Its location was a weakness.
I think we have to call Yiwu's location a geographical bug, not a feature, at least initially. The market's success wasn't because of natural resources or easy access. It was a result of sheer human will and policy overcoming that natural disadvantage.
It really is the commercial version of Las Vegas.
That is a perfect analogy.
Vegas was deliberately built in the middle of a barren desert. People don't go there because it's convenient. They go because a unique regulatory and policy environment forced everything to concentrate there.
And that's exactly Yiwu. People go there because they have to. Not because it's easy to get to, but because all the goods, all the vendors, all the efficient systems are in one place, forcing global buyers to converge on this otherwise unremarkable inland city.
So we've looked at the three big theories: culture, timing, and location. And they're all necessary pieces of the puzzle, but they're just not enough.
They're completely insufficient. Many other cities have those factors, and often had better versions of them.
Which brings us to the missing key: the synthesis. The factor that let Yiwu overcome its bad geography, transform its hustler culture, and blow past early pioneers like Wenzhou.
Right. What was the real game changer?
It sounds like it must have been some brilliant new technology or maybe a huge flood of investment money.
No. It was much simpler and also much more difficult than that. It all hinges on the precise coordination between the visible hand of government support and the invisible hand of private free enterprise.
The government actively choosing to build a framework that helped the merchants instead of restricting them.
That's it. It's all about that relationship.
Let's go back to that economic pressure we talked about. The government in Zhejiang was in a tough spot decades ago because of that resource scarcity.
Immense pressure. This is critical context. Data from 1987 shows that Zhejiang's per capita resource ownership was just 11.5% of the national average. They were third from the bottom in the whole country.
So when you have no land, no ports, no minerals, what do you have left to rely on?
You rely on your people, on
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. That scarcity forced this incredible reliance on the private sector.
And that's where the private engine just exploded.
It roared to life. By the 1980s, private, small, and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, made up a staggering 95% of all businesses in the province.
95%. So almost every single business was a small private operation, probably run by someone whose grandfather was a sugar knocker.
You could draw a direct line. And this explosion of tiny, competitive private businesses created this overwhelming need for a market structure. They needed a secure, centralized, and most importantly, a legal place to do business.
And this brings us to the real turning point, that moment of political courage in 1982. Because at that time, the Yiwu market was technically illegal.
Not just frowned upon, it actively violated major government bans.
What were the specific risks? Because just saying it was illegal doesn't quite capture how big a deal this was for the local officials who had to make a decision.
It was huge. The market violated at least three fundamental prohibitions. First, the merchants were abandoning agriculture to do business, which was seen as a threat to the national grain supply.
Okay, that's a big one.
Second, these were rural markets selling industrial goods. That was supposed to be the job of state-controlled channels.
And the third violation, that one really challenged the whole planned economy model, didn't it?
It was the wholesale issue. You had individual private peddlers engaging in wholesale. That was the exclusive domain of state-owned companies. Allowing individuals to become private distributors was politically radioactive. It directly threatened the state's control over pricing and supply.
So the local leadership had this stark choice: shut down the market, crush the local economy, and toe the official government line.
Or support the market, risk their entire careers, and save their local economy.
And the decision really came down to one person.
It did. A man named Shigawa. He was the secretary of the Yiwu County Party Committee. And he didn't just make a snap judgment. He spent 3 months on the ground, doing research, talking to the merchants, really understanding the desperation that was driving all this.
And in the end, he took a monumental risk. He chose to legalize the hustle.
He did. And this led to the issuing of Circular Number 1 on September 5th, 1982.
That document, it's everything, isn't it?
Circular Number 1 is arguably the most important document in Yiwu's history, and maybe one of the most important in China's entire reform story. It was the first government document in the country to explicitly recognize the legality of farmer peddlers and their professional markets.
And that is the aha moment. That explains it all. It wasn't that you had better timing or a better culture. It was that they got legal protection and official endorsement at the exact moment they could have been crushed.
The local government chose to support their local economic reality instead of just blindly following outdated central policy.
They built a foundation of stability and trust. They basically told the world, if you come here to do business, you are safe, you are legal, and you are supported by the state.
And they didn't just stop there at legalization. This wasn't passive acceptance. It was active nurturing. Just 2 years later, in 1984, they made it official policy. The strategy was developing the county through commerce.
So it wasn't just a slogan.
Not at all. This shifted everything. Land use, banking, infrastructure. It all became subservient to the needs of this market. It gave merchants incredible confidence to invest for the long term.
And then in 1992 came the real organizational genius, the market zoning system.
This is a concept that sounds kind of boring and logistical, but it is deeply strategic.
What did it do?
The zoning system is what makes Yiwu different from just a chaotic bazaar. The government mandated that similar businesses had to be grouped together. All the button vendors are here, all the zipper vendors are over there, all the toy makers are in this section.
Why is that one move so critical for becoming a global powerhouse?
Because it just crushes transaction costs for global buyers. Imagine you're a buyer from Nigeria and you need 100,000 different kinds of buttons. In a normal market, you'd waste days hunting down vendors.
But in Yiwu's zone system, you just go to the button section.
And within 100 yards, you have instant comparison shopping among hundreds of competitors.
It creates this transparent, structured, and hyper-efficient competition. The merchants have to innovate on price and quality because their main rival is literally 50 feet away.
It's brilliant. The government's visible hand created the perfect arena for the invisible hand of the market to work its magic. They standardized the marketplace, which is exactly what a global buyer needs to trust the system.
And they kept evolving. They even tackled that original geographical bug being landlocked. In 2014, they launched the Yiwu Europe Railway.
All of a sudden, the city with no port connected itself directly by rail to Madrid, thousands of miles away. They solved their landlocked problem by creating their own high-speed land port. It transformed Yiwu from a regional hub into an intercontinental one.
This whole story, this dance between the market's needs and the government support, it's captured in that incredible quote. The market is like a foot. We should put a well-fitting shoe on it, not cut the foot to fit the shoe.
That philosophy is everything. It shows a government that respects the organic shape of the private economy, the foot, but also understands its job is to provide the support and infrastructure, the shoe, so that the foot can go farther and faster.
They weren't trying to micromanage what products to make or what price to sell them at. They were designing the perfect ecosystem for the market to thrive on its own terms.
It's the gardener metaphor. The government is the gardener, the market is the forest. The gardener doesn't design the individual trees. The merchants do that.
But the gardener does the vital foundational work. They build the fence to protect the land, that's circular number one, the legal protection. They water the soil, that's the investment in infrastructure. And they prune the chaos when it threatens the system.
Yiwu's success story is not a miracle of pure, unregulated capitalism. And it's not a story of top-down central planning. It's the courageous convergence of a scrappy entrepreneurial culture born from desperation and a hyper-responsive government that focused relentlessly on facilitating, not controlling.
It's such a powerful counter-narrative, isn't it? It shows you can overcome huge structural disadvantages, bad geography, no resources, a late start, if that relationship between private capital and government is managed with real foresight.
It's the ultimate lesson in strategic economic development. To achieve that kind of global influence, you need two forces working together at the same time.
The first is that unwavering ambition for the distant future, the long-term vision of building a global hub, even when all you have to start with is brown sugar and goose feathers.
Yeah, and the second is the tactical courage to solve immediate critical problems. The political foresight of someone like Shigewa choosing to issue circular number one, instead of just enforcing the old rules.
When that long-term vision meets immediate tactical courage, you get a place that specializes in selling tiny plastic buttons, but operates on a scale that truly runs the world.
So it leaves you with a question, right? If Yiwu built a global empire on pure necessity and innovative policy, not on location or natural wealth, what constraint in your own business or your own project might actually be a hidden opportunity for a completely new structural solution?